As I looked out, I could see the creek that wandered through that valley. And fog had risen from that creek. And some of the fields around that I was looking down over had trees planted in the fence rows. And those pockets of fields, some of them had trapped the fog in that. It was early spring, the grass was greening up, the trees had just started to put out those small, delicately green leaves that we've all seen. And as I rounded the curve where I could see out over the top of that field, the sun came up. The rays angling down into those pockets of fog made them glow from the inside. It was almost a magical scene of beauty. Now, I didn't stop and contemplate it. I slowed down, drove on down to where I couldn't look out over it anymore. Excuse me. I may have told some friends about it at school, but it didn't change my life. I didn't even take that route the next morning. I went back to my old route. But obviously, it touched me. It is something that I still remember after 57 years. One of the characteristics of grace that makes them memorable is their unexpectedness. Probably 15 or 20 years after that event, we were visiting Alice's mother in Kansas. And at the time, much younger than now, I used to go out for a 6 to 10 mile jog before breakfast. And it occurred to me that there was a pond with some marshy area around it on that jog that sometimes had fog in the morning. And so I timed my run the next day so that I would be there about the time the sun rose. And I was right. The sun rose, it caught that fog, it glowed from the inside, and it wasn't the same thing because I expected it. I call such moments grace. The freely given, unmerited favor and love of God operating in human to regenerate or strengthen them. At least that's what the dictionary defines it as. Now, as most of you know, I'm a religious humanist. Religious humanism gives the highest priority to human desires and values and dignity. It emphasizes reason, respect, compassion, community, and human flourishing without the necessity of a belief in God. It doesn't say that God doesn't exist, it just says it's an irrelevant concept for this philosophy. Whether God existed or not, I would still try to treat people with respect, love my family and friends, try to do what good I can and keep from doing any harm, and basically try to make the world a better place for everyone and everything. So for me, grace is the natural workings of the universe and of chance that sometimes produces those aha moments that takes us outside of ourselves and our normal state of mind. But if you believe in a deity, those chance events may well be a gift from God. These moments induce a feeling of wonder and deep reverence, a feeling of awe. They tend to make us feel more connected to the world and to other people, besides which they just make us feel good. Of course, those chance events can also be ugly or detrimental, diseases or accidents are an example. I don't know that there's a technical term for that, nor do I think that they're the work of the devil or some malevolent spirit. Again, it's just the way the universe works. But grace isn't confined to moments of beauty in nature. All of you have had those, right? Those times when you just, Probably most of you who are new here don't know that my wife Alice is a breast, I still get choked up about it, is a breast cancer survivor. Stage 4 with metastases to her bones. The treatment that we chose, that Paul Daner found for us, was to have them extract stem cells from her bone marrow and from her blood, then really deep chemotherapy to kill everything left, all of the blood cells left, and then rescue her by reinfusing her own cells. Turns out that treatment killed more than 10% of the patients, but obviously Alice was one of the lucky ones. As you can imagine, recovery was a long and slow process. I'd used up all of my vacation time and sick leave, and so I was back at work. One day, Alice is sitting at home, and the fatigue, the not feeling well, being confined to the house, just caught up with her. It may have been her lowest point in the whole process. And then the doorbell rang. The mother of the neighbor next door was there with a bouquet of flowers. Sarah said she just wanted Alice to know that she was thinking about her and praying for her. Now, we had, both of us, a number of times when people, particularly from this congregation, came through with support and care and whatever. But this timing of this one, when she was at her lowest, coming out of the blue from someone that she barely knew, was a gift of grace for the universe in her time of need. How about one more from a completely different aspect, and one that did change my life profoundly? My mother was from a small town about 90 miles south of Dallas, Texas, and we lived up almost on the Kansas border in Oklahoma. But most summers, Mom would get my brother and sister and I in the car and drive down to visit her family for a few weeks. It's about a 450-mile drive. Now, that's a good day's drive even today, but in the days before the interstate, it was long. Well, it happened that when I was about 12, we were going to make that trip, and my aunt, my dad's sister, had recently moved to Dallas. And so Mom decided to stop there. It would give her a chance to catch up with my aunt and break up the trip. We hadn't been there very long when my aunt's son, youngest son, dropped by for a visit. He was a lab technician in a research institute about 2 hours away. And it was Friday, and he decided, just on the spur of the moment after work, to drop by and see his mother. Well, he happened to have some slides from the work that he was doing with him and asked if we would like to see them. Well, of course, we said yes. I mean, pretty much you can't turn down that kind of an offer, but we were interested in what he was doing. So he showed them. He was working on cancer, and I found it fascinating. It sealed my fate. I had already been leaning towards a career in science, but from then on, I knew I was going to be a biochemist. And indeed, that's what my PhD is in. Now, as I said, I was leaning towards science, but I probably wouldn't have become a biochemist. My skill set may lie more in the area of biology or even psychology or whatever, but that chance encounter led to all kinds of events, a wonderful life that I've had. It even was part of the series of events that led to my meeting Alice. So what's it all mean? How are we supposed to respond when grace happens? First of all, we need to be prepared for grace just as we prepare for the bad things that happen to us. Look for it. Recognize it when it happens. Enjoy it and let it lift your spirit. Share it with your loved ones and friends. The philosopher and theologian H. Richard Niebuhr said that there are three possible responses to the universe. You can believe the universe is malevolent and it's out to get us, and it will get you if you don't watch out. This is the attitude that fundamentalists of all religions take. The second one is the universe doesn't care about you. It probably doesn't even know that you exist. Now, this is probably the attitude that most scientists take. It's one that I believe is true. The third way is that the universe is benevolent to life, and particularly to human life, and it wants us to do well and to be happy. I don't believe that. And yet, looking back over my life, that's the way I've lived my life. It's made me more open to those moments of grace. I suggest to you that the only authentic response we can make when grace drops into our lives is deep gratitude. By definition, grace is unmerited, so be grateful for it. Indeed, be grateful for everything. Friends, family, a full belly, a roof over your head, everything. If you do this, you will not only be happier, but research shows you'll live longer. I think this attitude of being thankful for everything was captured in a piece I wrote 2.5 years ago. Leanne Caldwell was doing a series on the history of Augusta during the Civil War year by year. And on the last year of doing this, that last day, she asked if I would be willing to give the blessing for the noon meal. Now, Leanne knows that I'm a humanist, but she also knew I would do a nice, inclusive blessing for the meal, and I said sure, and I took some notes before I had to do that. It was really well received, and so I've used it several times since then, and it goes something like this. The food we were about to eat was grown by farmers whom we will never know. It was processed by people who were just doing their job. It was transported by truckers who probably never gave a thought to the people who were going to be using what they had behind them. It was sold to us by cashiers whom we may recognize by their face, but whom we never know. and the food was prepared by hands that we will never hold. The only authentic response to this is one of deep gratitude. Let me close with another instance of grace in my life. In late April or early May of 1992, I'd run into a problem with some computer stuff I was doing. So I went upstairs to talk with a colleague about it. Many of you remember Tom Nosik. Tom was on the phone when I got there, so he waved for me to sit down, and I did. And of course, I couldn't help but overhear what he was talking about. Well, it became clear he was on the phone with a lawyer about a suit that this congregation had brought against the roofer for this building because the roof leaked. Many of you are nodding. Yeah, remember that. Well, he hung up, and I verified that it was the Unitarian Church that he was talking about. He said it was, and in fact, he was the current president. And I said, Alice and I are thinking about reconnecting with the church, and could you bring me some information about Unitarianism? Well, he corrected me saying, it's Unitarian Universalism, but agreed that he would bring the material. And after Alice and I read it, we decided it was intriguing enough that we came here the next Sunday. We never left. That was grace number one. Grace number two was we joined the church in early July, and 6 weeks later, Alice's cancer was diagnosed. And people in this church lined up to offer help and support in any way they could. People whose names we could not tell you at that time because we hadn't been members very long. It was another act of grace, and one for which we are profoundly grateful. Namaste. Maybe so. Amen.